Hello, good morning, everybody. My name is, for those of you who weren't here before, my name is George Pickering, and it's my great pleasure to be the compere for today. And for those of you that were here before, my name is still George Pickering. Some of us have been here for 3 days, and some of us have been here to lots and lots of tech conferences. Can I just ask, is there anybody in the room who's been to all 5 conferences? Can you put your hands up? Wow, these are the tired people, eh? Can I ask you if you've been to more than one conference? So that's quite a lot of people, okay. And anybody for whom this is your first conference? That is a lot of people, right. And anybody for whom this is the first day of your first conference? Welcome to you two ladies. Okay. And just to remember what we've said before at these conferences, because it can be a bit confusing, if you've got a right brain, look at that screen. If you've got a left brain, look at that screen. No brain, look at me. Okay. Now, I'm going to give some announcements later on, but I just want to give one at the beginning because I think it's quite a nice one. There is a gentleman called Jagannath Jha from High School, Kursakanta, Bihar, and he's worked for 32 years as a teacher and an educator, and he retired yesterday. Here he is. So, thank you very much. Thank you. Brilliant, fantastic. And we're, okay.
Yes, I am going to start.
Do you want to say something? And he really, really wants to say something, so he will say something.
Good morning, everyone. And as he has said just now, I have been retired from my service, but I am not retired. As I think it's my beginning, if you don't step forward, you will stay at the same place. It means you have to move always. In Veda, chareveti, chareveti, chareveti. Chalna hai, chalna hai, chalna hai. It's the way of life. As I think, as I have given honor like this, I am standing before you on the universal stage of British Council. I am grateful to British Council. One thing I want to say, one line of Mr. Vivekananda, arise, awake, stop not till thy goal is reached. And this is the journey of life. This is the journey of British Council. I have started my life as a school teacher, but I retired as a headmaster. But in the meantime, I am a member of British Council, so I can't retire. As I think.
Thank you very much.
One thing more. One thing in Hindi, why my emotion can't be expressed in English, really. सब कुछ जीवन सब कुछ सिखा देती है, यह कभी रुलाती है, कभी हंसाती है, जो हर हाल में मस्त रहता है, जिंदगी उसके सामने झुक जाती है. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. I agree entirely. And there's not really much more I can add, but thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Just the final thing that we all need to do, remember that it's not just us in the room. There are people viewing us via webcast, and as we traditionally do, speaking to those two ladies over there for whom it is your first day, we look at the cameras in the middle of the room and we say welcome in our first language. So welcome, welcome, namaste, etc. So look at the camera, wave and say welcome. Excellent, thank you. So, right, back to the script. It's my very great pleasure to ask Mohan Raj, the Dean of the EL Education School of EFLU, to introduce our plenary speaker, Alison Barrett.
Good morning, everyone. I am very happy to introduce Dr. Alison Barrett, who is at present working as Director, English for Education Systems, South Asia, British Council. Alison Barrett has been here in India for about 20 years, and she has made an in-depth study of Indian education system. In many ways, this makes her an insider-outsider. She understands the Indian system thoroughly, yet she can view it fairly objectively. Today, in her presentation, she will look at different types of tensions that exist in the teacher education programs, particularly in terms of the theoretical inputs they receive or the pedagogical knowledge they possess with the practices they follow. Based on a set of sound arguments, she suggests possible directions in which teacher education programs can proceed in future. I now warmly welcome Dr. Alison Barrett to make a presentation. Dr. Alison Barrett.
Okay, good morning, everybody, and thank you, Dr. Mohan Raj, for that very nice introduction. I hope I live up to your expectations. I'm here this morning to introduce to you this topic, A Fine Balance, Teacher Education in the 21st Century. It's a Sunday morning, so thank you all for making it here so early. I thought I'd try and start with some kind of story about cricket, but even though I've been in India a long time, I still, I'm afraid, don't understand the fascination that both India and the UK have with cricket, so I'm afraid I didn't come up with a funny anecdote about cricket. I did try some out on some colleagues last night, but they said no, it wouldn't be a very good idea. So instead, I'd like to start by just asking you to spend a minute just talking to the person next to you. And I'd like you just to, very briefly, just in 1 minute, to say what's the biggest thing that has made an impact on your professional development in your career. And then we'll come back to those at the end of the session. So if you could just spend 1 minute, what's the biggest thing that's had an impact on you in your professional career? Okay, thank you. A nice buzz going around the room, so I look forward to hearing what you discussed at the end of the session. I'm going to ask you a few questions and see what came up. So far during the conference, we've heard a lot about the role of the teacher, and I just wanted to emphasize the importance of that. There's a learning crisis. We heard from Rukmini yesterday about the challenges that India faces in terms of achieving learning outcomes. We heard about children not even achieving grade level and even being 2 or 3 grade levels below what the expectations are of the government. So there's a learning crisis, and all children are entitled to have a teacher who's motivated, trained, enjoys teaching, but I think really importantly, a teacher who understands the needs of their students and focuses on their students. And I think that's one thing I want to pick up on through the session today. Some of you will be familiar with John Hattie's research. He's from New Zealand. And over the last 10, 15 years, he's done a huge amount of work looking at different studies that have identified what makes the biggest impact on learning. And as you can see, this is a very simplistic summary of his work. It's much, much more complex than this. And if you have time, I'd recommend you read his book, Visible Teaching and Visible Learning. You can see the big blue chunk of the pie here that's focusing on the students. The students' characteristics, they have the biggest impact on learning. But the second chunk is the teacher and teacher effectiveness. That's followed closely by parents, school facilities, leaders, and peer effects. So you can see that the role of the teacher is completely unanimous in all the research, how important it is. But just because the student is number 1 on this diagram, it doesn't mean that we should ignore the student. I mean, it doesn't give us the right to say, the biggest impact is the students, therefore my students are like this. They're first-generation learners, they don't come to school on time, they don't study well, they're always late, they're sleeping in class. You can't make excuses for your students. As Colin Bangay said on day 1 in the panel discussion, whether you're teaching students in Bihar or teaching students in urban Chennai, you should be giving the students the best that you can give them wherever you are. And you can change your teaching, you can't change your students. So what does this mean for us as teacher educators? It means we need to work even harder because we know that by working with teachers, we can really make a difference. But of course, that's much harder in practice, much easier to say. So what about the teacher educator? Well, I thought this quote was interesting, a study on what teacher educators do that was published last year. It says there's hardly a murmur about the quality of those who teach teachers. And Maya Menon was lamenting this yesterday. There's not enough focus on the quality of teacher educators. I think if I look around this room, and hopefully to those people watching online though, we're proving them wrong. Because I've heard not just a murmur about teacher education over the last few days, but quite a loud roar about what we can and are doing to make a difference. Here are some of the teacher educators we work with from Maharashtra and Karnataka, for example. And you can see, that they're enjoying their roles as being teacher educators. This roar has been partly fueled by the fantastic work that's been done by the Indian government in bringing out forward-looking progressive policies that focus on teacher education. In 2010, the National Curriculum Framework for Teacher Education was published. It gives a very comprehensive view of the challenges of teacher education, but also identifies solutions. The 12th five-year plan that was published a couple of years ago, well, you can read the quote here. A very welcome focus on the need to identify, recruit, train and fully employ teacher educators across the country. And Professor Panda, who's the chairman of the National Council for Teacher Education, is at many public fora saying the same thing, the importance of training teacher educators, both for pre-service and for in-service teacher education. The Justice Verma Commission report that many of you must be familiar with, that was published also in 2012, lays out some very simple guidelines for us on how we can improve the quality of teacher education. So a huge amount of work is going on. The context, though, is hugely important. If you've been to any of my talks before, you might have seen this spider web before. I think I've been showing it for a few years now, and maybe I should call myself Spider Woman. But I think it's a really important one that demonstrates the complexity of the context in which we work. And it's really important that we must never forget that. And I want to reassure you that what I'm talking about today is very much rooted in the context in which we all work. It's a challenging context in any country, not just in India. In any country, educational contexts are challenging. We have to think about the political economy where we're working. We have to think about what teachers need to learn and how they need to learn it, where they need to learn it, how they need to learn it, in terms of which media that they can access and use. We need to think about teachers' own personal lives and their own families and their own commitments. We need to think about the role of leadership, school leadership, district level leadership, government. We need to think about the context, the micro context, the macro context, the role of assessments. We've been talking about that as well during the conference. And we need to think about the culture, and it's very important that we remember what Rukmini was telling us yesterday about the role of languages and the home language and the impact that that can have on our ability to make a difference in the classroom. So with all this happening around us, and with everything that we know about teacher education and language learning, what's within our power? What can we actually do? What kind of impact can we make on the ground? There's a door. It's closed, unfortunately. I probably should have made it open. But here, John Hattie talks about as teachers, when teachers walk into their classroom, they do actually open and then they close the door, and they have the power to do in their classrooms what they think is right for those students. I think it's similar for us as teacher educators. We might not have a door. We don't necessarily work in one room. We might get on our bicycles and cycle from village to village to talk to teachers. We might go to conferences. We might be working in an office. We might travel to see teachers working in their schools. But I think we also have the power to make a difference. So I have three main themes, three main tensions that I'd like to try and address today. The first one is about monitoring and mentoring. This quote here from the Ministry of Human Resource Development talks about how critical the role of monitoring and the lack of follow-up, the mentoring that teachers receive after training, that it's one of the, one of the key failings in the current scenario of in-service teacher training in the country. Does that ring a bell with you? Does that sound familiar? Yeah, lots of heads nodding. So monitoring and follow-up, one of the huge challenges that we have. But I also think it presents us with a really big challenge and tension in our work. Sorry. So what do you think? What is the difference in your mind between monitoring and mentoring? What kind of monitoring have you experienced? What kind of mentoring have you experienced? Again, I'm sorry I'm making you work, but take a few minutes again to talk to your partner and think about these two elements of teacher education. Okay, thank you. I'm not going to ask you for feedback. I think we might not have time, but did any of you come up with similar definitions to these? Just put your hand up if your definition was similar. Yeah. Okay. Good. How many of you have experienced monitoring? Put your hands up. Okay. Large number of hands going up. How many of you have experienced mentoring? Ah, I'm very happy. Again, a large number of hands going up. That's great. I think here, generally when we experience monitoring, in my experience of going to classrooms around India, the experience is looking at inputs. The monitoring focuses on the number of children in the classroom, how many scheduled caste or scheduled tribe kids, does the school have toilets, all of these different things. And it's very rare, in my experience, that we see monitoring of this kind, monitoring to check progress, how change is carrying on, and how, what successes are happening in the classroom. And I see people nodding. I've walked into classrooms before when the person I was with has asked a child to stand up and to read a line or two from the textbook. And if the child is unable to do that, then the monitor says, the teacher hasn't done her job well. The child can't do this. The child doesn't know what this means. That I can see is looking familiar to many of you. So that's often the kind of monitoring that I've experienced. Mentoring, obviously, is very different. Doesn't necessarily have to be done well either, but it's very different. Mentoring, we're focusing on providing coaching and support to teachers in their place of work. I want to show you a piece of research that was done by Joyce and Showers in 2002. They did a study of what makes the most impact on staff development. And they looked at different elements. They looked at theoretical knowledge, demonstration and modeling. They looked at practice, and they looked at coaching. Which one do you think has the biggest impact? Can you predict? Giving teachers knowledge, demonstrating lessons, letting them practice and practice teach, or peer coaching and mentoring? Which one do you think had the biggest impact? Coaching, yes. Okay, so have a look here. It's quite interesting to see that through the different outcomes, we're looking at the outcomes relating to their knowledge, the outcomes relating to their skill and their ability, their transfer, their ability to use that new knowledge or that skill in the classroom. And what they found was that the transferability to the classroom is much, much greater if there is peer coaching during the training and after the training. It makes a much, much bigger impact on what the teachers are able to do afterwards. I think that's quite an impactful study and resonates with other research done by CFBT and by other researchers as well. So what are the implications then for us? We've thought about monitoring, we've thought about mentoring. What are the implications? So stakeholders or partners or funding organizations, they are really keen to identify evidence of impact. They want to know exactly whether their money that has been spent is being spent in the right way, is having the right return on investment. And often that is driving the monitoring that is taking place. The monitoring is to check whether people have used the money in the right way. So it's about accountability. It's holding people accountable for doing something in the right way. It's obviously they need to do that. They need to be able to know that the way their investments are actually making a difference. But what I would like to argue is that it's much more important if we try and focus on monitoring, not just on how money is being spent or how many children are there or how many teachers attend the training or how many days of training the teachers do or how many courses they attend, but on what kind of impact they are making on the learning in their classrooms. And that has to change the way that we do the monitoring that we do. As one of our colleagues from South Africa said yesterday or the day before, we need to use data to improve what's going on and not just to prove what's happening. It's really important that we focus on improvements and learning and not proving. But more importantly, I think what this is showing us is that monitoring is, it must be done in parallel with mentoring. And it can't be confused with mentoring. Very often, people, I think as Michael said yesterday, people will go to a classroom, they'll do their monitoring, and then they'll say, oh, yes, I mentored 6 teachers this week, or 7 teachers this month. I've met my, quota or my target. But that monitoring has not actually provided any professional development or support for the teacher. The teacher has left no wiser as to what they're doing well, what they're doing wrong, what they could be doing differently, what kind of impact that what they're doing is having on the children in their classroom, and how they could change and improve that impact. So I want to argue that it's really critical at this time in India's evolution to focus on mentoring and to really invest more resources, time, energy in developing mentors, developing the resource to be able to carry out really meaningful mentoring at school level. This is a picture. Mizo Prava Bora, I can see her somewhere in the audience. Where are you? Oh, there you are. Mizo is a lecturer at the at the SCRT, in Assam. Assam is very lucky to have a really dedicated team of ELT experts working at the SCRT in Assam. I haven't come across many other states who have that kind of level of expertise, and I see Debanjan clapping at the front. I know we have some fantastic expertise at the ELTIs in many states. The one in Bhopal is notable as well. But I think that they're particularly fortunate, and I guess I know them well, which is another reason why I'm talking about Mizo here. I interviewed Mizo before I did this talk, and it was really interesting talking to her about what she thinks has made the biggest difference to the teachers that she works with. And it was also the mentoring that she does. And this is a photograph of her going out to schools in Assam, observing them, spending time with them, understanding their needs, talking to them about what they're doing, and helping them, as she said, reflect, which she said was the hardest thing to teach teachers to do, is to help them to reflect on what they've done, but on what the impact of what they've done has been. So I thought that was really interesting to share. And it's not just about Mizo going into those schools and saying, I am the expert, I know everything, and I'm going to tell you what to do. It's not like that at all. It's about going into that classroom, spending time with the teachers, having a conversation, talking to them, and understanding their challenges and providing ideas and teasing out possible solutions that teachers can find to their own challenges in their own classrooms. And another point that she made was that by doing this, she learns not only about what is needed in the classrooms in her state, but she also learns more about her own needs and what she needs to develop in order to help them better. So it's a form of mutual professional development. It's not just about developing or working with teachers, it's about developing your own awareness and your own skills and your own ability to help the people that you work with. So what I would really recommend is, I'll try not to should. I know Rod is probably looking at me and saying, you know, we do a lot of shoulding when we're teacher educators. You should, you should. But I would strongly urge you and recommend you to try and find time in your schedules, find time working with your seniors to identify free up your time so that you can spend more time with your teachers and mentor them in the future. And change the discourse in that mentoring. Change it from what did you do well today, what did you learn about your teaching today, to what did your students learn today, what did you teach them, what did they learn from your lesson today. Focus on the student. Let's move it away from the teacher. The teaching is really important, obviously, but let's change that discussion. Let's make it about what the learners are doing and what they need to improve. But is mentoring only for teachers? Why do we put so much burden on teachers? It's always the teacher's fault, isn't it? That's what people think. Of course it isn't. It's not only for teachers. Mentoring is as important for all of the other stakeholders that we work with in the education system. Just read this quote for a second. All of these people are responsible for the planning and the implementation of the professional development that teachers and teacher educators receive. And it's absolutely critical that they also receive support so they can improve their own professional skills as well, that they can understand exactly what it is that you're trying to achieve and have a shared vision that together you can try and bring about. The research that Martin Waddell has done brings out this point strongly. He did a piece of research on cascade training in 2005, and one thing he found was that projects that focus only on the academic structure, on the teachers and the educators and the head teachers, that there are lots of those, but very few projects that really focus on building those parallel support structures. The district administrators, the education officers, the people in the state who are responsible for distributing the funds, for telling you when your training is happening, sending you your government circular where your training is taking place, that kind of thing. So it's critical that we focus on them too. This is an area that the British Council has really tried to focus on over the last few years. So a couple of examples for you. On the left, we have our colleague, Gauri Puranik. She's the head of our English partnerships work in West India, in Mumbai. And she's working with a group of 30 officials from the state of, from the city of Mumbai, from the municipal corporation, some of whom probably are here. Wave if you're here. Yeah, some of you are here. And the focus of that workshop was not on necessarily so much on the academic content of the training, but it was on where should the training take place, what kind of venue, how will the trainers get there, what kind of support do they need, what kind of project plans should be in place to make sure that everything happens smoothly, all the logistics of getting materials to venues on time, all of those things that are absolutely important. And it's just a small thing. It seems like such a small thing, but if a teacher arrives at a training venue and it's dirty or the materials haven't arrived, that makes a really big impact on how they then face the rest of the week's training. They start off with a very kind of negative view of how they're being treated by their seniors. So it's really, really critical. On the right, we've got some text messages that we use in Bihar. This is something my colleague Joydeep Bordaloy has started. And we send out bulk SMSs to all the teachers that we're working with across the state, giving them updates and information about what's happening, where it's happening, so that everyone knows exactly what's going on. They don't have to rely on systems that may not necessarily work or maybe last minute. One other piece of mentoring I want to share with you that we did that was very successful. Tamil Nadu has, as you know, a really successful ABL system. It was introduced at least 15 years ago. Any of you from Tamil Nadu? Yeah, quite a few. It's been evaluated and is probably one of India's most successful educational change projects in the last sort of 10, 15 years. And what they were able to do was plan and organize their in-service teacher education to ensure the minimum amount of disruption on the students. So the students wouldn't miss days of learning because of the training that the teachers were having, but also the minimal amount of disruption on the teachers and their lives as well. So what we did with Assam is we took a group of Mizo's colleagues to Chennai, and they spent 2 or 3 days with the Tamil Nadu SSA working through the plans that they needed to put in place to make sure that their delivery, their logistics, their planning, their administration went smoothly as well. And as a result of that peer-to-peer mentoring of the managers of the inset, the training went much more smoothly. I'm not saying perfectly smoothly, but much more smoothly than it would have done. They were able to ensure there were substitute teachers, that there were pairs of teachers working together to train other teachers, that there were British Council trainers supporting them in each of the different locations, that we had time to do pilots of materials, which is often a luxury, to be very honest. And so it was a really good experience. So, mentoring. The second theme I want to talk about is around CPD. Of course, I couldn't forget CPD. But before I get into the detail of CPD, I think that, as Rod said, we all have a really good understanding now of the importance of continuing professional development, the importance of developing ourselves through a whole range of different ways and not just attending training programs. But for the reality at the moment is that training is the main source of professional development that teachers get. And I want to talk to you a little bit about the tensions that we face in designing the content of those teacher education programs. This is something that David Hayes brought up in his session yesterday, and it's from a British Council needs analysis report that he wrote for us, published very recently. And have you heard this comment before from teachers? Yeah, I've heard it at least 4 times in the last 2 days alone. We know the theory, we understand the theory, we know the theory. We want to know how to translate it into practice in the classroom. So that's the dilemma you're faced with when you're preparing and developing teachers who are sometimes expert, sometimes experienced, sometimes newly qualified. How do you deal with this conundrum? So this tension is about moving from training to development. Sorry, my notes here. Knowledge obviously is important. Theory is obviously important. I think, was it Winston Churchill, George, who said that without theory it's very dangerous, something like that. You know all the Winston Churchill quotes, don't you? I'll come and get it from you later. But without knowledge, without theory, obviously we could be letting ourselves loose in the classroom and not helping our students in any way. But we need to have knowledge of theory. It's like Rod said on the first day, knowledge of language, knowledge of theory. We need to know how to use methodology, how to use all the different tools at our disposal in the classroom. So we, on our programs, we know it's really important that teachers and educators have the freedom and the flexibility to use content in the way that they think is appropriate for their teachers. We think that's really important, and that is our ultimate goal in all the work that we do. However, when we meet many of the teachers we work with, their theoretical understanding, they have that, they're able to spout theory, they're able to tell you what a ZPD is, they're able to tell you, what Piaget thought and all of these different things. But it's really difficult for them to then use that and to understand what is the right way forward. So we tend to follow quite a prescriptive approach in the very first phase of our training, and we provide our teachers and our educators with relatively sort of scripted planned sessions for them to try, for them to use, for them to get confident, for them to actually practice these different tasks and techniques on each other and to build their confidence and to build their understanding. But we don't do it without asking them why. It's absolutely critical that you ask your teachers why. Why are you doing this? What are you learning from this? How is this going to impact your children, the children that you're teaching? And so we take a very principled approach, but we very much focus on encouraging those teachers to use different techniques and to build up their repertoire. We do it largely through micro-teaching. We do it through micro-training. Sometimes the teacher plays the role of a student. Sometimes they play the role of a teacher, and they wear different hats depending on which kind of activity it is. What we find from doing this is that it's very, the teacher's beliefs become much more apparent. If you do a needs analysis, any kind of needs analysis, teachers will always say, oh, when I'm teaching English, I will use pair work, I use group work, I use English in the class, I get my children to speak English. But then when you go and observe them, the reality is very, very different. Often they might be using mother tongue or 2 or 3 languages to teach. They're using grammar translation. That may be fine, but they have this espoused theory. They have this way of talking about their teaching, but actually they're not doing that in practice. It may be because they can't do it. It may be because they don't really believe that it's the right thing to do. It may be because they're prevented to do that by their principal or by the noise coming from the other students. There might be a whole host of reasons. But it's a good way when you're in training to see exactly what it is the teachers believe. And then you could start from that. You could start from what they really think, what their attitudes are, and then you start the discussion, reflection from that point. That's really critical. This scaffolding, it not only enables us to address the beliefs, but it also is done in a very non-threatening and a very supportive environment. They're often using English, even if we ask them to speak in their mother tongue. They're using English, and so they're feeling maybe slightly nervous about using their English. They might be making mistakes. So it's a really safe environment for them to practice, and there's a lot of praise and a lot of encouragement. So that's the kind of approach that we take. And we find that as teachers work with us over time, that they become more confident and more able to theorize from their practice. The professional development framework, I think, follows a similar path. A similar kind of development process. You're looking at awareness raising, then you're building their understanding of a concept through reflection and discussion. You're engaging them more deeply in the theoretical concept and in the theory through the practice that they're doing. And then you're helping them integrate that into their own repertoire so they can use it again and again and again. So, like my colleague John Shackleton said, Mr. Framework, I'm not sure if he's here, he might be playing tennis, but first we hear about something, then we find out about it, then we try it out, and after we try it out a few times and we believe it works and that it's having an impact on the learning of our children, then you put it in your suitcase and you keep it for later, and you pull it out when you need it. So like Diane Miller said at the debate, you then have your cups, you have your boat, and you have your rubber duck, and you can use whichever methodology, whichever one you feel is appropriate for that group of students that you're working with. So, what about beyond training? After all, CPD is about much more than training. So we believe that change takes a huge amount of time. It's very unrealistic to expect teachers to change their practice and for learners to suddenly be achieving much greater gains than they were before the training started. It takes a long time. This quote here from Jeff Petty, he's a teacher from the UK, written a very good book called Evidence-Based Teaching, which is very practical. So again, another good one for you to look at. He says that, in a summary again of Joyce and Schauer's study, that research shows that change in practice takes a lot of time. They need to experiment, they need to try things out 20, 30, 40, maybe 50 times. So on a training program that we would do, we might work with teachers for 5 days. They would then go back to their schools, try things out, come back again after 2 or 3 months, talk about it, reflect, try out a few new things, discuss with their peers, adapt, think about how they might do it differently, go back, try again. And this cycle happens over a period of years. So if I take Maharashtra, for example, the project that we've just finished with the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan there, it was a 20-day program run over 2 years. So the teachers had 4 batches where they could, 4 periods of training where they could come back and share and discuss and try things out. But it doesn't end there. The journey continues even beyond the training room. So if I take you through that journey, we start with our needs analysis. This is a colleague of mine, Arun, interviewing a school management committee in Bihar. It moves to an assessment, a baseline. So this is a group of teachers who are taking our APTIS language test. This is for 2 reasons. One is to see what their level of language is, so it can help inform the design of our program. But also, it's a baseline. And we also use our APTIS assessment to recruit master trainers with a minimum level of standards, because another important ingredient of quality is to get the right people doing the training at the right time. Then they go to their training, as we've said. In between the training, they may have access to listening to our Teaching English radio series. This is developed specifically for teachers of English in India. They may watch our teacher development film series and do activities, self-accessed materials, use resources to practice on their own. Some of you may have been to the TES India stand in the main hall, in the exhibition hall. They're also developing a whole range of resources, open educational resources for teachers and educators to use. So we're in the process of mapping those resources to our framework as well, so we can point partners and educators that we work with to a much vaster range of resources than we could possibly do on our own. We ask teachers to think about what's going on in their classrooms, so they do action research projects. One of my colleagues in Delhi, Manisha, who's here somewhere, ran a series of action research projects with teachers from New Delhi Municipal Council over a period of about 2 months. Very simple, very small studies, but really impactful in terms of challenging and thinking about, the teachers challenging and thinking about what they're doing in the classroom and what impact that's having on their students. So they did pre and post tests, and they changed, and they did different things. And then finally, this is a group of teachers from Maharashtra who are here learning about how to use ICT in the classroom, because in their schools they now have computers, they have computer labs, so they have access to resources that maybe 5 years ago would have been unthinkable. I would never have been talking about ICT on this stage 5 years ago. Things have changed so much in India, and we have to get ready for that new reality as well. So the cumulative impact of all of this is just one thing that my partner researcher, Emma Sue Prince, and I found through the work that we've done on the CPD framework and through working on CPD initiatives together, is that CPD is not just about professional development, it's about personal development as well. And Emma Sue even wanted to change the acronym and call it CPPD, continuing personal professional development, I think is really important. It's a way of addressing the whole issue of motivation potentially, because if you are providing teachers or providing access to CPD opportunities to teachers, they are more motivated, they're more interested in developing, they can see what's happening, and they understand that after all, who wants to be a bad teacher? Nobody wants to be a bad teacher. So it's about them becoming more confident in their own abilities to make a difference with their children. I'm not going to go through this because I think Michael talked about it yesterday, but if you are more interested in how we monitor and evaluate and the details of it, I can talk through that with you at 2 o'clock today when we do the Q&A session. Oh, it's frozen. Maybe I'll have to talk you through it. Okay. I just want to get to the summary. So just to summarize, some of the key tensions I've talked about are between monitoring and mentoring, between pedagogical approaches in the classroom, not starting with theory, but starting from where you are, starting from practice and theorizing from that place, and about the time that you need to be able to access a whole range of different types of professional development opportunities, not just training courses. So some reminders, we really need to find ways to build in mentoring and coaching into our work. There's some really exciting work going on in Malaysia with the government there, that some of you may have been to some of the sessions here. I have 2 or 3 colleagues from Malaysia who have presented on that project. We really need to think about how we can find the resource to be able to do something as potentially transformational as that. We need to think about mentoring not only for our teachers and for our educators, but we need to think about mentoring also for the people supporting them, working with them. We need to create that whole sense of a team, one team working together for one shared goal. We need to think about the practical, as I've just said. We need to think about face-to-face training as the trigger. It's the trigger that can lead you to a whole range and host of other things. It's not a magic bullet. As much as people advertise, learn English in 20 days, it's really not possible. So it takes time. You really need to see training as the beginning of a journey. CPD should underpin everything we do. It has the potential to really contribute to personal fulfillment and to motivation. And next session, actually, in this room, we have Krishna Kalyan Dikshit, who's doing his PhD on teacher motivation, so stay here if you're interested in that. Change takes time. It's everybody's responsibility. It's not just the teacher. The teacher may have the potential to make the greatest impact, but it's not just up to the teacher. She needs support. She needs help from everybody working with her. And finally, the role of the teacher educator, I think, it's really crucial that the teacher educator thinks carefully about all these contextual challenges, all of these constraints, and thinks about ways to negotiate through them. Don't just give up. Don't just say, I can't do this because the assessment is grammar. I can't introduce speaking because the test is different. I can't, don't say that. Think about how you can find a way through. Get your school teachers on board, get your seniors on board, show them the data, prove to them that if you do this, the impact on those children will be better. And again, nobody wants those children to do badly. So appeal to them, tell them that this is what you can do to make a difference. I hope you found that helpful. I'd be very happy to talk to you further and would be really interested to hear of any of your ideas of what things you have done that have been very practical and maybe seem quite small, but have been really, really important in making a difference in the context where you work. So I'll be available for questions from 2 o'clock. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alison. It was a very comprehensive presentation, and it has taken into account various aspects, began with aspects of quality teacher training, and it's led us to teacher development through a variety of paths. The paper is now open for discussion. I invite questions. No. Okay. There are no questions. There is a question-answer session at 2 o'clock when Alison Barrett will defend all her questions. Thank you, Alison. Thank you very much for that nice presentation.
Right, thank you very much, everybody. We do have a couple of important announcements about the next session with cancellation, so if you could just wait a moment. But I've just got a quick request. My mum and dad don't know what I do when I travel, and they just like a couple of shots of you. Okay, so... Could I ask you all to wave? Okay. Right, so this is today's program, and as you can see, the only other session in this room that everybody's going to be attending is the valedictory at the end. Now, I know some of you will not be here at the end, so if you would like to congratulate the organizers on a fantastic conference, please can you applaud now? Right. And on behalf of the British guests here, I'd just like to thank the organisers for arranging the rain yesterday to make us feel at home. That was a very nice touch. Okay, so if you were staying in the Radisson, the checkout, for, the travel desk, sorry, for you is going to be opposite the organisers' suite. Please fill in the feedback form that you will find at the back of your conference program. And if you didn't manage breakfast today, remember the expression, feedback is the breakfast of champions. And if you ask for a physical copy of your certificate, then you can collect that. Now, this is where it gets slightly tricky, because there are two changes at least to the parallel sessions which are going to take place now. Firstly, the original session in GO3 has been cancelled, but it's been replaced, I'm delighted to say, by a session by Syed Najim on managing quality in difficult circumstances. The gentleman has come all the way from Afghanistan to speak to us, and you can see the description of his talk on page 20 in the brochure. Now, this is the interesting bit. The original talk in 201, the value of workplace learning, has been cancelled. However, in 201, you will find the workshop on teaching new learners. Okay? So that has been moved from 203. Right, I feel I should concept check that, but it will probably take too long. Parallel session at 1400. I'm afraid that the sessions in G04 and 104 have been cancelled. Okay? So, thank you very much for your attention. I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.